Good morning. You're listening to Central Wisconsin's 24-hour information station, AM 1320 WFHR. It's time now for the Morning Magazine, brought to you by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. Now, with the Morning Magazine, here's Carl Hilke.
Thank you, Jerry, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's show on AM 1320 and also on the web at WFHR.com. We also welcome Jesse from RCCA Media, who is here, and I already made one mistake. The weather was not in its proper alignment on my computer screen, so I missed it, but I'll give you a quick look at this, at the temperatures. Partly sunny and 68 right now in Wausau, and it's partly sunny and 68 in Marshfield, and mostly sunny and 74 here in Wisconsin Rapids Point. Your weather station is down, and we'll get more into the weather a little later in today's broadcast with the next weather segment. But it is time to visit with Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink. It's his monthly visit with us, and he will be here for the entire hour, and we invite your participation, and it's very easy. You call 715-424-2600 or pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone, and you can talk to your mayor. With that, we welcome the mayor of Wisconsin Rapids, Zach Vruwink. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Carl, and to our listeners.
Okay, well, a very interesting presentation last night. As you can see, I was taking notes.
I see that. You were a good listener.
Yes. But we had Supermass Studio from New York, whose specialty is landscape architecture and urbanism. Mm-hmm. I went on I used the link that you posted on your newsletter.
Community update. Good.
See, I do my prep work, sir.
Look at that. I'm impressed.
And it was on their I love the term, near final preliminary design for Riverfront development. They outlined a 5-phase program totaling $9.5 million. Obviously, a lot of this is going to be private money. Mm-hmm. But the goal was to respect the river, open area kind of development, economic development, sustainability, all of these different things that we want to do to make full use of this beautiful resource.
Right.
And the 5 phases would begin at at Veterans Memorial Park, and at Demetz Park, the final phase. Mm-hmm. Okay, this was like, and folks, I would go to RCCA Media. I believe they would have the archive of last night's meeting and the presentation, because it's very impressive. I mean, it's futuristic looking in many ways. My first question is, where do we go from here? And this presentation, this kind of a company, they don't come cheap. How are we paying for the work that they've done over this 3-month period?
So the work that they've done was actually budgeted in the 2015 budget. So we had some improvements planned in Mead Rapids View Park. That's the park directly across from the triangle development that the city is pursuing, which is near the courthouse and the roundabout. So their work was budgeted through the 2015 budget. But as far as where do we go from here, their presentation last night was really presenting the master plan, as we're calling it, for any of the riverfront, riverbank enhancements and development, taking us from the City of Wisconsin Rapids Dam, which is just to the north of Legion Park, across from SS Peter and Paul Church, taking us down to Demetz Park, as you mentioned, which is across from Aspirus Riverview Hospital. So that is really the area of focus, and the intent of this plan or project was to take a look at the urban section, we're calling it, of the riverfront. And so we're not looking at riverfront specific to down by the Fireman's Memorial, for example, which is a city public park and public riverfront, but really that urban section. And our intent from this process was to consider what could be the economic impact through public space improvement, knowing that residents or talent or folks that are seeking jobs or looking to move to communities want to have really cool, engaging places that have a vibe, places that afford them the opportunity to spend time with their families or bring in guests to town when they're visiting, and ultimately too to really put ourselves in a position that we've got an attractive riverfront. Many communities around the state that have done this have had seen some really strong returns on their investment, whether it's Eau Claire's Confluence project, which is still underway in different phases, but there's a really kind of a near example to ours because of the public waterfront features that they have in their waterfront spaces where the confluence of the two rivers come together. And you talk about Green Bay, in downtown Green Bay, where the city deck project happened, where there was lofts and there was apartments as well as some retail spaces. Some people might call it Hagemeister Park. That's a really neat kind of a gastropub environment. But right across from all of that was beautiful public spaces, improved spaces along their waterfront. And some would say, it isn't very pretty waterfront, and I would say ours is prettier, definitely, much better to look at. So our approach with this was to really put together some preliminary designs. We hadn't had any designs for the spaces. We've had our downtown master plan, which was approved back in 2006. We hadn't taken it a step further to look at our public spaces. So this project will close out the urban section from Dam to Riverview Expressway, we'll call it, Bridge, the public spaces of programming those spaces. So for 3 months, they've been in Wisconsin Rapids on and off and designing what's feasible, hear public feedback. We've had a number of public invites and meetings, whether it's at lunch by the river or in the evening in the park and Veterans Park, where the public and residents have been invited to attend and give their feedback. So today, actually, we just came from a meeting with them. They presented to the City Council, as you mentioned last night, their near final version. It was the first time the City Council had seen the full plan. Our plan from here on out is, one, we've got to close out the project. They're not finished yet with that last night's presentation. There's some outstanding items related to Riverwall, geotechnical analysis. That Riverwall is nearly 100 years old, and want to make sure that that Riverwall is going to last at least another 100 years. So their geotechnical analysis will be coming in the coming weeks. And then you talk about phasing. There is a price tag associated with anything, any park improvements. There's a price tag and a cost. There's also a maintenance cost, an ongoing cost. So our approach with this project is to take a look at the phasing that they proposed, because this is only a proposed phasing. It's not something that the city has said, here's how we're going to pursue this, but it's a proposed phasing. And it was 5 phases, and the first being, as you mentioned, Veterans Park. And they primarily emphasize Veterans Park because it's the most utilized park today, and they feel that with some of the other enhancements, it could be an even better experience for folks using the park. What we plan to do, though, is to take a look at the phases in greater detail, and then over the next 30 days, bring it to any group that wishes to see the designs or give us feedback. So city staff and I will be taking the designs to groups like the Realtors. We've got the Mayor's Youth Council and a bunch of youth groups that we want to get the designs in front of. We at the Senior Center a number of times to get the input of those that are at the Senior Center, as well as anyone in the community, again, that has an audience that wants to put their input into maybe the phasing of the project. The designs, I would say, are likely not going to change much. The public input that has been received thus far has really refined the designs to where they're at. But again, it's a master plan. It's a long-range plan. Likely a 10-year plan is a number that I would say it's safe to say. And the City Council then will consider the final plan, we'll call it, in October. So in about 30 days from now, the City Council will consider adoption of the plan, which doesn't mean they're going to fund it, but it's going to be, hey, we agree to the designs that are being presented.
I wanted to get into more, and we're going but we have a caller on, and I want to get into the financing. I want to get into some different aspects of that, but why don't you put on your headsets, Your Honor, and we'll get to our first caller right away this morning. And good morning. You're on the air with Mayor Vruwink.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to bring up an issue with the mayor about the ambulance, the city ambulances, when they take patients from Riverview Hospital up to Aspirus, or they might probably take them up to the Weston too. But I've had several family members now that had to be transported up to Aspirus, and the ambulances take the route They go north through Junction City, and one time a family member was needed to be moved quickly to Aspirus. They got caught by the trains. I don't understand why they don't go up 54 to 39, and you can go. I don't know how fast ambulances are
65. It would
legally 65 at least. That they would not have the problem of being caught by trains, and you know how we have the problem currently with train blocking roads. So that is a very strong concern of mine, because, like I said, I've had several family members now that have been transported by the Wisconsin Rapids ambulance service. And
was this, ma'am, just real quick, was
Sure.
this? You said Wisconsin. Was this the Wisconsin Rapids Fire Department ambulance?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Just want to make sure, because there is a
Yeah, it's not
private
United.
service.
No,
Okay.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't United.
Okay.
No,
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep. That's why I'm calling.
Okay.
So I don't know if the mayor would have, but I think that's something that maybe he can't, doesn't know the answer to, or. But I think it's something that needs to be looked into.
Why don't we get the mayor's answer real quick?
Sure. I
Okay.
think I'd like to see the route they took, because I don't know of a crossing they have to cross between the hospital and 34 and Rudolph, going north on 34 as the bypass to
It's by
Highway 10.
Junction City.
But there isn't a crossing between here and Highway 10 anymore that they would have to, unless
Yeah,
they took.
there is.
Unless they took
It's
Highway.
the route that they go.
Okay.
Well,
I'd like to
but-
see that route, because there shouldn't be a crossing.
Yeah, because if they're
they
going
take
from 34 to 10, you go past.
Yeah, there's no crossing.
They're
no
not
cro-
going 10, no. They're not going on 10.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely want to talk to them. If you take 54 to 39, it is significantly more miles. So I'm not sure, like
Well,
you
it
say,
might be
there's-
more miles, but heaven forbid you don't
can
get
drive
caught
faster.
by the
Right.
by the train. And it was not only that, but a family member, they were waiting so long that they had to call the sheriff's department, the Portage County Sheriff's Department, to get that train moved.
Okay.
Okay.
So, this is a great concern. I'm sure it's happened before, but
Yeah.
to me, it's why take that route anyways? I mean, you got 54, 39, you go 65 miles an hour.
Or just
Maybe in
take
miles it might be longer. but-
34 to 10 would solve the problem. If they
right.
just took 34 to 10, goes 65 on 10 as well.
Right. Yeah, and I appreciate the question, because it's
But
something
you
we
can't
should
go
look in-
65. You can't go 65 on 34.
Well, if they're running lights and sirens,
They can go as fast as they need.
Well, I know, but I mean, you got two straight shots.
Sure.
I mean, you're not having to worry about. You got 4 lanes there on both ways on 54. You're not talking about 2-way.
Well, yeah, and there's a small
You know.
crossing on 54 near the.
Yeah, you got the
but-
train crossing right there on 34.
I'm saying on 54, but thankfully there's not frequent train long blockages there either.
Yeah.
I'll definitely take a look at it and talk to the fire chief, because the route that they're driving really should be the quickest and avoid any sort of.
And my question, too, is if this relative, if someone needed to be transported very quickly, should they, a lot of times, they med flight them. I know.
Well, no, I mean, no, it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't that critical.
Oh, okay. I was
Yeah,
just wondering.
but I mean, it was, it was something that, anyways, they
Okay.
needed to get up there. I beat the ambulance up there to Wausau
Wow.
because they were caught by the train.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
that was not good.
Sorry to hear that, and I'll definitely talk with the fire chief, like I say, so that we can take a look at what routes they're taking.
Ma'am, why don't I would like to make a suggestion to both of you. Why don't you call the mayor's office after the show is over and give your name and phone number, and then when the mayor talks to the fire chief, the mayor can come get in touch with you and hopefully resolve your concern.
All right, thank you.
Would that be good? Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I think that would be, that way you can give her a report directly about.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, the fire chief or the deputy chief are in a quick position to answer this. If she's looking for a real quick answer now while we're on the call, I would suggest that maybe she call the fire station 2 and talk with the chief or the deputy chief and just get that quick answer. But certainly if there's a problem or something that needs to be changed, something
the protocol needs to be changed.
Right.
Okay, your special guest has arrived.
He is.
Before we continue with my waterfront questions, why don't you introduce, and he's no stranger to the area. I have talked to him before in his previous job.
Yes. Well, we're very pleased to welcome Joe Terry, who is actually the former village administrator and engineer in Port Edwards, to the city of Wisconsin Rapids as our director of public works. Joe comes with a tremendous background of not only administration, which is a benefit to having that purview and perspective, but also the technical understanding and the experience that he has in the engineering and public works space is something that he will apply in great detail in our public works director position that the council funded through the budget process last year.
Okay, welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Okay.
Third day on the job, right, Joe?
Third day, yes.
What made you decide to leave your previous position in the village of Port Edwards and accept the position with the city of Wisconsin Rapids?
Well, one of my great interests is public works, and while within the village of Port Edwards, I had a significant number of hats to wear, from public works to engineering to administration to survey to zoning to building permitting, cemetery sextant, parks, water, wastewater manager. I really wanted to focus on public works in general and apply what I've learned, engineering and some of the other hats that I've worn, and to be able to apply that to benefit the region, specifically in public works and parks.
Okay. Your first impressions, like Mary pointed out, it's your third day on the job, so your first impressions of what you're coming into.
Well, it's certainly been a whirlwind so far. I've got a lot to learn. I know Port Edwards very well, but I've got a lot to learn about Wisconsin Rapids, its infrastructure. I've met with much of the staff. I took the opportunity to meet with the police chief, take a tour of the police department, met with the fire chief, toured the fire department, had a brief meeting with Jim over at Streets, and got to get back with him and spend some more time with the staff. We took a look at some projects, things that are going on. Met this morning. I'm a little bit late this morning. I apologize for that, but this morning I was down at wastewater, meeting with Jim and the staff there, getting familiar with the plant, its operations, how it's different than the plant that I'm used to working with, and just trying to understand the operations and infrastructure in the city. So there's going to be a lot of work on my part to get up to speed, and I'm well on my way.
Okay. What are some of your goals? You probably were asked this in the interview process, but I'm going to ask you here for our listeners and your new employers, the taxpayers of Wisconsin Rapids. What are some of your goals?
Well, sure. One of my goals is to be a champion of public works. Some of the staff have heard this, but most of the public probably hasn't. When public works employees are doing their jobs, nobody notices. The water comes out of the tap, it's clean. You notice when it's dirty, but you don't notice when it's clean. You expect that. The public expects that the roads be, drivable, reasonably smooth. They don't expect to have streets closed off and obstructions of traffic. They expect that their wastewater will be treated. You flush the toilet, it goes away. That's a general expectation, but there is a lot of work and a lot of budgeting and a lot of effort and talent and expertise that goes into all those facets to provide those services so that you don't notice. And so one of my goals is to be a champion of public works, to help develop budgets and processes so that we are proactive in maintenance, repair, and replacement of infrastructure, and to help be that liaison between the staff and the mayor and the council and the public to try to really paint that picture in a way that's understandable and helps bring public works to the forefront.
I'll ask this of you, but the mayor can weigh in on this too. Because of your previous executive type responsibilities in Port Edwards, does that give you a better chance to work with the mayor and the council, because you kind of understand the inner politics that come to work in a municipality?
Well, absolutely. And, some things that are frustrating for some people when you start talking about budgets, working with, with accountants and CPAs, and that can be tough for someone that's working in general out on the street, talking about equipment and infrastructure needs. And there are several different languages. And, I have had that opportunity, and I certainly have an appreciation for the accounting that goes into budgeting, and I've built budgets in Port Edwards for all these years. And at the same time, I understand the needs, equipment needs, personnel needs. So I think that's a unique combination of assets that's going to allow me to be a liaison to communicate between the departments as well as administration and finance to get some things done and communicate well.
Your take on that same question from your perspective?
Well, I think, as Joe said, it really comes down to the fresh set of eyes. I think of my first, as I talked with Joe on Monday, my first year, let's say, on the job as mayor of the city, really was to be that fresh set of eyes and offer a different perspective than those who currently and have operated within their constraints for many years. And I think Joe, over the course of his first year, first number of months, first days, really will offer a new perspective to all of those operating in public works, whether it's doing street maintenance and repair or in wastewater, in parks and engineering. So any of the departments will benefit from having somebody that's obviously a seasoned administrator, but also understood in what it takes to get the job done at the end of the day.
And Joe, when you come into a community that's going through like this riverfront design, I mean, Public Works is going to be a big player in any implementation of any long-range, 10-year, whatever kind of plan. You're going to have an important role in telling folks, well, we can do this, but we can't do that. What's your thoughts about that? It's got to be kind of exciting for you, I would think.
Absolutely. It's really exciting. And, the anytime you have a new piece of infrastructure, and it was discussed last night at the council meeting, it's important to sit back and take a look at the initial upfront capital cost, but as well as the maintenance and repair costs and lifetime costs for that asset. And that's something that I'm really excited about bringing to the table, is trying to and putting together those capital plans, and so that the mayor and the council can be well aware of what those costs are, and then be able to make those decisions based on having that information, rather than maybe being a little more reactive and waiting for something to break or something that's failing or calls from the public that there's a problem. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. Really, what it comes down to is quality of life, and what we have in this area is a great quality of life. To have the river here and so many amenities, and especially if you like nature and being outside, the cost of living is inexpensive here. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to love this area.
In fact, I've been getting, you might have seen, Your Honor, some of these news releases. There's some group that rates communities based on cost of living, taxes, and the like, and they're aimed mainly at seniors. But Wisconsin Rapids ranks way up there in the state of Wisconsin as a place where it's very affordable to live and invest your money or whatever.
Most recent was number 4 on the list of most inexpensive places to retire.
That's right.
Because it takes a look at
the same list.
Your tax liability, your property tax liability, other tax and expenses, just general cost of living. And, so it's great to be in an inexpensive place to live, because we know that at some point folks are going to be wanting to leave those more expensive places in search of less expensive places, if they have the amenities, if they have the features that keep them there and keep them engaged and want to live there.
And that gets into the whole question, like with this and project, obviously, something like this is going to involve a lot of the private sector, a lot of philanthropists and people who want to donate money. Talk about how we go forward in terms of how do you envision raising the capital needed for, as Joe pointed out, not only for building what we might, whatever we decide we're going to do eventually, but also maintaining it.
Well, I think, it goes to the city's longstanding position to invest in its future. I looked back just on a quick summary basis of all the investments the city has made in even more recent years and then longer term. I think back just not that long ago, the 2006 investment the city made in the wastewater treatment plant expansion, $22 million expansion. It was no small amount of money. It was publicly financed by debt that the city took on, but it was also financed by the industries that benefited from it. Ocean Spray and Mariani, then Urban, who took it upon themselves to commit to debt servicing that expansion. So it was really a great partnership between the public entity and the city, and then those industries that benefited from that expansion. And then you take a look back at, let's say, the senior center, the Lowell Center development back in 2002. There was a $4 million bonding that the city took on for the commercial space, and about $1.5 million of the senior center. Obviously, a significant amount of private donations and individuals who supported that project to make that a reality. And then you think back even further in the 90s, the Highway 34 bypass, in which the TIF district was created via Consolidated Papers expansion of number 16 and the investment that they made in the 34 bypass. And then earlier, the 1970s, the mall redevelopment project, the Riverview Expressway, and before that, the Veterans Park and downtown building teardowns to make way for the public spaces that we have today in our downtown area. So, there's really a long-standing commitment of public-private philanthropic support, and I think the Riverfront project is going to be no exception. We know with the $10 million price tag and our ability to finance that is very little, but there is some ability for us to bond. We have one of the lowest debt capacity, or the highest debt capacities and the lowest debt load of municipalities our size in the state of Wisconsin. And that's a great thing to have at our capacity. There's a lot of other needs, obviously, right now in other areas with infrastructure, but we consider this to be just as important as the investments we're making in our streets and underground utilities as a means to improve our quality of life here.
And we know, you young millennials, there are new ways of trying to recruit funding. Mm-hmm. And I understand that's already been happening with some of the folks who are getting kind of excited about this.
Yeah, there's actually been a young family, a gentleman that I've gotten to know since becoming mayor, and he created what's called a GoFundMe page. So it's a crowdfunding effort to raise individual donations, which really is a testament to the fact that people are very excited about this and understood that it's going to take a variety of financing sources to make this a reality. And we have a community that is well endowed in the sense of philanthropic means, and we're excited to continue to involve those folks and keep them aware. The river has been a great convener in many ways, and I would say in the philanthropy space, this is going to be yet another opportunity for those foundations in our communities and in our community and those that really care about the future to invest again in the future of the Riverfront renewal. We have to take our first break, but the phone lines are open at 424-2600 or pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. You can talk to the mayor and Joe Terry as well with any of your concerns. You're listening to The Morning Magazine.
Good morning and welcome back to The Morning Magazine, presented by Comfort Air Heating, Cooling, Plumbing. It's time for part 2. Once again, here's Carl Hilke.
Thanks again, Jerry, and welcome back, everybody, to today's show on AM 1320 and WFHR.com and RCCA Media. They are digitally recording this in high definition for later viewing on either their website, rccamedia.org, and I got it right here, right in front of me, or Solaris Channel 3 or Charter Cable 985. And you remember, you can view this on demand 24 hours a day at rccamedia.org. And also, if you miss it on the radio side, go to WFHR.com and you can listen to the archive versions of the Morning Magazine, any show, 24/7 as well. Okay, Wisconsin Rapids Mayor Zach Vruwink is here. Joe Terry, the new Director of Public Works, is here. So if you have questions about Public Works, Joe would love to hear your input. 424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. You said, Joe, in introducing yourself to the community, you've been looking at some of the projects, and there's a number of them going on right now. What's your philosophy and how a community handles a project, how it deals with the community before, during, and after a project?
Well, certainly before a project, we want to be having public information meetings to involve the public in the process, so that they understand the plans, so they can understand what their expectations will be during the process for mail delivery, their own access to their homes, the duration of the project, what type of improvement is going to be undertaken, what time frame, and then of course during the project we want to be having meetings and availability, so if there's questions that they can be answered, some project updates, so that the public's well aware of what's going on. Some projects are lower profile than others. Some residential projects you might just be dealing with some of the local residents on that particular street. Other projects may be arterials and major collectors where folks are using those roads to get to and from their places of business, not just from their house. So there's different levels of communication required. And obviously that's something that I've got to work with our staff on and get understanding on how the city manages that now, and if there's room for improvement, how we can best do that most effectively.
And that was something, Mayor, last time we were here, we talked about, because some folks brought up some questions. Why is the city doing this? Or why wasn't I told about this in advance? So obviously there's some communication gaps currently. And so how do we go about solving that?
Well, I think definitely a review of the current methods, right? And I think Joe has stated that we haven't maybe taken a real good solid look at our means and methods in which we operate, and we've done it maybe in bits and pieces, but haven't collectively taken a look at them all. And that's going to be a role that Joel will probably convene and not necessarily do alone, but with the support of each of the departments, so they can review and understand where are the gaps, by way of public input. And we don't know what we don't know, it's said, and I think in the same vein, if folks have suggestions, they can get them to us a number of ways, and we can certainly bear them in mind as we move forward in a review of our administrative processes within the Public Works operations.
Of course, people think of Public Works and they associate that with a big sphere of a lot of different things, and everything from, like you mentioned, the infrastructure. Hey, I got clean water, my toilet's working okay, and the like, to, hey, why isn't my street plowed?
Oh, absolutely. And including urban forestry.
Oh, that's been a growing, and we're a tree city.
Absolutely, and we've got a lot of ash trees that we're going to have to deal with in the next few years. So, our parks, our community buildings, our public parking lots, really just about everywhere you go that is publicly accessible and owned by the public is a responsibility of the maintenance of a division of Public Works. And and to your question earlier, you asked about first impressions. The one thing, I guess, and I've only been here for 3 days now, and it seems like one, but but I have been very impressed with the staff. The opportunities that I've had to meet with with the staff in the field, their supervisors, the administrative staff here, the engineering staff, and also the police and fire staff. I've been very impressed by their professionalism. They've been quick to point out some needs, and it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of efficiencies going on right now that that have impressed me very much. So I'm really looking forward to moving forward and continuing that.
Your Honor, is one of his charges, you mentioned new set of eyes, is to maybe point out some things that need to be addressed right now that are being overlooked?
Yeah, no question. I think that's kind of an informal charge that Joe and I discussed when we first sat down was, using this opportunity and as truly an opportunity to take a look at things and to make notes and obviously to trust that what's being performed today is the best but also considering what could be alternatives to what's being done. For all of us to have an informed discussion. Obviously, he's in the information gathering stages today and will be for some time, and that's going to really go on for really a long time. And I think for him to use his experience and wisdom that he brings with him via his past experiences to the city is something that we're very interested in and will continue to value as we go forward.
What kind of input, Joe, would you find valuable from the citizens, private citizens, businesses, and the like? What kind of input right now should people take this opportunity to give you?
Oh, any issues, whether it's traffic issues or access issues, communication issues, educational issues. It's always a challenge. When you're doing your job, you see things through your own eyes and in the shoes that you wear, and it's oftentimes difficult. Snow plowing, for example. There are routes that that each of the staff has, and we see things a certain way, but that's not how necessarily the public sees it. They have other interests. They have their lives to deal with and work and places to go. So communication between the public and Public Works is really important, so that maybe we're doing things okay, but it's just a matter of education and understanding. And maybe there's some small changes that can be made to make some big difference to the public. And
how does that fit in with the cultural change that's been happening with the Lean Six Sigma philosophy of looking at a continuous look at improvement and efficiency?
Well, that's ever evolving, and Joe's obviously in his role with the city will have a role to play in that, really as a champion and as overseeing those projects and expecting of his staff that they're continuously improving and looking for ways to make improvements. Obviously there's a timeline, and those projects, as we've talked on your show and previous shows, they do take time, right? Because you've got to get through certain cycles to be able to analyze them and to propose improvements. But there's no question that there will be a role to play in the area of rapid improvement, the Lean Six Sigma initiative the city has.
Okay. Obviously, this is an older city. I mean, and every time you put a shovel in the ground, there's a chance you're going to find something. This should have been fixed decades ago, but we're really going to have to do it now. That's why I asked you, like with the Chestnut Street project, did you find any surprises? But how do you budget for something like that? Can you budget for something like that?
Well, knowing, really a lot of that comes with the experience of staff. Some of these areas where if you've got some sanitary sewers where are approaching failure, if you've got some staff that's been around and knows that what's underground in those areas, there's some wisdom there that can be tapped into. But it is very difficult. I'm in Port Edwards. We're working on a fairly substantial project, and we ran into some rock that wasn't anticipated. It put the project back almost 3 weeks. It disrupted, the first day of school. The buses couldn't get there. So those types of things are challenges that we face every day. Even when you do soil borings and do a lot of work to try to understand what's underground, what you can't see, a lot of times you don't know until you start the excavation. And so it becomes very challenging for the staff, to sometimes maintain timelines and satisfy the project schedule.
Okay, we got a caller, gentlemen, so let's get to that caller. Good morning, you're on the Morning Magazine.
Yeah, Carl, just quickly, traffic falls under his jurisdiction. If you go to Flower, you got left turn arrows that'll flash yellow and you can continue, compared to a lot of time being wasted at a red left turn arrow in town. And I know the state has to be involved, and I'll listen off the air, but if there's something that could be done in town, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll bring it, and I'll tack on to that. Syncing up of lights. Okay. The other day, again, well, now I'm not taking it this week, but it would have been last week because Chase Street is blocked because of the railroad improvements. Thank you. I'm very happy to see that. But you get to the fire station, and you sit there and you wait. You're going, come on, I thought this thing should trip. It wasn't until a car came from across the other side of Grand Avenue that the thing tripped. Those are things that get people frustrated. I'll let you respond to both of those, Joe.
Sure. So I do know that, in the 3 days that I've been here, that type of flashing signal that the caller asked about is something that's on the table. There have been some discussions about that. I'm not up to speed on those, but I know they're taking place. So we're looking into that to try to make things more efficient. I know from my own observations, there are a number of places in town where we have cycle failures. A cycle failure is where traffic approaches a light, they're stopped, the light changes, and they don't go through on that cycle. That ends up being very frustrating for people. It tends to cause people to try to run the yellow and eventually the red, and creates an unsafe situation. So evaluating the timing on the lights becomes an issue. It becomes a maintenance practice, something that needs to be done somewhat regularly, but it does depend on traffic counts and modeling, and I know the city practices that. As far as the timing of lights, the last 18 and a half years haven't really worked with a whole lot of traffic lights down but that is an emphasis that I studied back when I was in college. And when I worked for the city of Marshfield, we spent quite a bit of time synchronizing the lights downtown in Marshfield. And when we got done, we had a really neat system. There were very few delays. The problem was, in that particular situation, that every one of those lights was on its own individual timer. And those clocks are not atomic clocks. They're not completely... They don't run the same, and so the problem in that case was that that unless someone went out and reset those clocks and synchronized them really on a weekly basis, a lot of the work that we did ended up not being effective. In Wisconsin Rapids, a lot of the lights are time based on detectors. Vehicle drives over the loop sends a signal to the controller. The controller is programmed for different times of the day to run in different cycles and segments, and that's done. Those decisions are made based on traffic counts and observing the intersections. It's a lot of work to do that. And again, I'm pretty new here. Only been here 3 days, so I've got a lot of work to do with with engineering to see how often we check those. But I can say personally, I've seen a number of cycle failures. There's also some frustrations. I know those. I'm an avid motorcycle rider. You get to some intersections, and the detector loops are set so that when a vehicle drives over, it'll signal that, and the signal will time out to whatever time is pre-timed, so that it'll continue on a highway, for example, until a car approaches a side street. Some smaller vehicles, and it's metal passing over, it's iron passing over a loop that sends a small electronic voltage to the signal equipment, and that's kind of how it works. Smaller vehicles that are that don't have a lot of steel in them, aren't very effective at setting them off. So bicycles, motorcycles, some cars even have a hard time setting them off. And you can adjust the sensitivity on these things, but a lot of times if it's a turning movement and vehicles, and it's adjacent to a straight through movement, if you have it set so sensitive that it picks up the small vehicles, a vehicle in an adjacent lane may pick it up. So, there's some compromises in these systems, and and some challenges in trying to make them work perfectly. But that's why some of these things happen.
Okay, we got to take one final break, and then we'll be back with more here on the Morning Magazine on AM 1320 and WFHR.com. Welcome back to the Morning Magazine. The Wisconsin Rapids Mayor, Zach Vruwink, has been here for the entire show. And Joe Terry, the new Director of Public Works, is here as well. The phone lines are still open at 424-2600, pound 1320 on a U.S. cellular phone. And if you have, especially if you want to give Joe some areas of concern that you think he should take a look at, like the mayor wanted him to bring new eyes to our public works, and you might have some concern areas, and feel free to weigh in. Your Honor, looking at, obviously, the consultant, Supermass Studio, and this developmental plan for the riverfront, this is their recommendation of how you do it. Mm-hmm. My question is, would it make more sense to start with the Tribune building area, since you're already doing a major, remodeling of that building, to start there instead?
Certainly a good point you raise. We haven't settled on phasing from a local standpoint, so that very well could be an area of focus. We know that through the development of the Tribune building, in a developer's agreement, we secured an investment in the public spaces surrounding it. It was primarily, I believe, identified between the space between the parking lot and the Centralia Center, but there could be opportunity to revisit that question of whether or not we do some improvements between the building and the river, the Tribune building development in the river. Through that developer's agreement, I believe it was, in lieu of the exchange of the parking lot, right, that the city provided the development. So definitely is a valid point you raise, and I've been looking at it from the perspective of what are the areas that we don't have improvements today? Because if we take something great and incrementally improve it, it's less of a wow factor maybe than bringing something new to a space that doesn't exist. So, I think Legion Park and I think Mead Rapids View Park are two areas of consideration maybe from that point of view. So, we welcome residents' feedback on that, and that's certainly a good point you raised.
And the other thing is, the Chamber leadership class, one of their previous classes, and they're still working on raising funds, was for the lighting of the Grand Avenue Bridge.
Right.
Now, how would that fit in?
Yeah, they didn't go into great detail last night because it's hard to see in the council chambers and it's kind of hard to envision on a slide. But they did program, and I think in the near final design, how they would propose lighting the area actually between the bridges, the water, which can be done with some unique fixtures and things. And then they also proposed lighting the bridges themselves. And, we've got to get further understanding of how they propose that to be done. But the good thing is, we didn't have a design previously as the leadership group started raising funds, but they had this concept or idea of lighting the bridges. And it's very much in alignment with their work here. In fact, it was a deliverable they had to explore, was how to effectively light the bridge and add another dynamic in the evening to the downtown area.
And that leads into this overall question. When you have folks already involved in Tribune building, and the excited about lighting of the bridges, or excited about certain parks, that's a tool to use. I mean, going forward and actually making dreams or plans into reality.
That's right.
And how do we facilitate? What role can the city play in facilitating all these individuals and private groups and whatever in doing that? Because that's a huge resource.
Sure. Well, solicitation of financing is a big one. If you can demonstrate to the state or any other entity for that matter that there is a groundswell of community support for this.
That's why we got the WEDA grant for the Tribune building.
It's much easier to support any of these entities to support a project like this because they know it's being well received and it's going to be an asset. It's going to be something that the city will take care of, something that the residents will place in high regard, and ultimately take advantage of. So I think that is one aspect. The other aspect is to maybe solicit funding on a localized basis and to energize donors about what could be the possibility of contributing to a project. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to engage the many people that have been involved in the areas you talk about.
And Joe, as like you mentioned, you're 3 days on the job, but do you have a priority list or in terms of areas you're looking at initially and then working through it? Or
well, initially I'm meeting with the staff. I'm getting to know the buildings, the facilities. I'll be spending some time on the streets, just literally doing a windshield survey of the streets, getting a good understanding, with our staff, what the immediate needs are, and then meeting with the mayor and council and getting an understanding what the public's needs are. I anticipate also, I've got to get familiar with the policies and procedures in the city. As far as how projects are done from the financing standpoint, operational budgets, those types of things, and I'm also working on making it a priority to have some type of regular public outreach, whether it's whether it's a specific office day, whether it's an afternoon or evening. Meet me in the park. We're going to go for a kayak paddle up the river. To try to do some public outreach and create some events where the public would have an opportunity to sit down and just chat in an informal setting, and enjoying the assets that exist in the city.
I think it would be very educational for everybody, and like you said, we'll give you a chance to be a champion for public works and use it as a teaching tool.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, it comes at a good time. We're in the process of the 2016 annual budget. So from a standpoint of looking forward of what are the inputs in a financial sense that we can provide certain aspects of city operations, and for Joe to once again provide a fresh set of eyes, but even to understand the extent and the largesse of all what we do is a really instructive opportunity through the budgeting process.
okay, well, gentlemen, a very interesting hour, and Joe, welcome. Good luck with your new job, and Mayor, we'll talk again next month.
Sounds good, Carl. Thank you, and thank you to our listeners.
And that's going to wrap up this edition of the Morning Magazine here on AM 1320 and WFHR.com.